monk, minimalist, human. Hello, I'm talking to you today about the sense or nonsense of doing without. Of course, we first have to ask, what is being foregone? And another perspective is renunciation. That's almost an evaluation that is contained in the word inside. What appears to be a sacrifice to one person may even be presented as a gain to another person. So just imagine saving money on this perhaps somewhat tiresome topic. Many people can probably imagine that, after all. So if I forego spending all my money every month and save it, then at some point I could buy something with the money I've saved. Or I'll take another example from social psychology called the marshmallow test. I'm just going to quote this off the top of my head. Maybe that was a little different. There was a single child sitting in a room and there was a chocolate cake on the table. And in this test, the psychologist said to the child, "If the chocolate course is still there after half an hour when I come back, I'll walk straight out of the room. But if the chocolate course is still on the table, then you'll even get two of them, me." Yes, sacrifice, gain. In the long term, I think this psychological test determined that it wasn't so much the academic training that determined success in life, but rather whether the children had passed this marshmallow test, or whether they had immediately eaten the individual chocolate course. Success means that I know what I want in life, and I want to achieve it, and I don't just turn off at every first intersection, but rather I have a route in my head. I also give mystic seminars on the side, and I have read, researched, and tried out a lot about early monasticism in Christianity. I pass on the exercises to people today, and what becomes clear again and again. When we get there, what do you actually want? What goals do you have in life? If an elf stood in front of you, who would you want to be? When you say you have problems in relationships, what kind of vision do you have of a relationship anyway? Or what kind of project do you have in your free time? What you want to achieve? What makes you happy? Then at the beginning there is often a lot of awkward silence because people function in society to always quickly get their first marshmallow. But these big ones, long-term goals, who do I really want to be? What makes me happy? On a higher level, just functioning, fulfilling duties, being popular, gaining recognition. Many people have obviously not been asked these questions enough in their lives. And even if you ask yourself this question, what would I give up as a marshmallow in this society so that I could then perhaps achieve 2 marshmallows as my main goal in life? Yes, there is a lack of role models in this society. Unlike today's lecture, the topic of renunciation and needs is in Christianity. Christianity is just a pretty big, fat religion. This has been going on for over 2,000 years and has many, many currents. When asked about Christianity, I see the clearest, purest form in the first 6 centuries. As early as the year 400, a state religion was established out there. So Christianity as a state supporter, as an instrument of power, from there it gets a bit difficult. And it was precisely from the 4th century onwards that monasticism emerged. People have broken away from this state-supporting movement in order to continue to achieve 2 marshmallows as people, instead of simply eating the one-state marshmallow as an immediate reward for being good and functioning. So I answer the question of renunciation or gain in Christianity from monasticism in terms of these first movements. So they became a life orientation for me because these individual marshmallows seem too disgusting to me, too hollow. I really wanted to know, if you go all out in life and concentrate on the whole thing, what can become of us as humans, also as an experiment on myself? Now, I have really funny friends who are also following a similar path. If you want to take that route, the main fear is, oh, the others won't love me anymore. They'll cast me out of their pack. I will become lonely and unhappy. Yes, of course, there are these social rejection reactions that you might find a bit like punishment. So they became a life orientation for me because these individual marshmallows seemed too disgusting to me, too hollow. I really wanted to know, if you go all out in life and concentrate on the whole thing, what can become of us as humans, also as an experiment on myself. Now I have really funny friends who are also following a similar path. If you want to take that route, the main fear is, oh, the others won't love me anymore, they'll cast me out of their pack, I will become lonely and unhappy. Yes, of course, there are these social rejection reactions that you might find a bit like punishment, but you will find many, many new friends if you show yourself as who you are. So you win, even if you give up previous relationships. I'll now quote from my new circle of friends how the others experience sacrifice and gain. One is a classic monk who lives and has very strict conditions, so you would say that more sacrifice is not possible. So single, long-term shared apartment, life sentence, behind walls, cloistered, permanent silence in a Trappist order. We know where we are Trappists, there is a nice book there. Henry Nouwen, a Catholic priest, once went into a Trappist order as a guest and tried to live with them. As a Westerner, even though he was a Catholic priest, it was quite difficult for him, because when he was constantly silent and had hardly any distractions, his cultural identity fell apart in his hands, and he thought he was going crazy. He then described it very, very honestly in a diary. So, if you look closely at what initially appears to you as a cultural gain, then you realize that they are pretty glass beads. And there are a lot of conflicts, and you often live in contradiction to your own deeper nature. You are like Indians who gave up their land and natural resources for glass beads and firewater, renunciation and needs in Christianity. So now an example of someone saying, I would rather be an Indian than give up my land for you. So about a real Trappist monk who lives today in one of the European countries. I was pretty well behaved until the age of 16. Altar boy, competitive sports. Then I became quite rebellious, punk and so on. Afterwards I was in Israel for a while, then went to a Christian church and was converted. Then I lived in an evangelical ecumenical community. I then joined the Trappist order, left it again, then lived with Francis Cannon in a project with the homeless and with junkies. And then I was in a hermit community for 2 years. There I had my first conscious experience of unity. These were undoubtedly entrances into reality. I also practiced Zazen intensively for 10 years with a Zen master and everything. I trained in psychotherapy and then became a Trappist again. At the same time, in addition to Zen, I also live with the Jesus prayer, i.e. my comments, i.e. with this mantric meditation that I also like to convey to people today. It's something like non-stop Zen in everyday life. So back to the quote, I also practice the Jesus prayer and, like the monks, the psalm prayer, because our everyday life looks like this: silent, praying, working, reading holy texts, and then I am in a state in which there is no prayer at all and no exercise. There is then no front, no back, no up, no down, no time, no questions, no answers, no religion. There is still no spirituality and of course no mysticism. They actually have no substance. And in this traditional sense, I haven't been interested in church, monastery, religion, or spirituality for a long time. What keeps me going is prayer, especially this Jesus prayer from the Orthodox tradition, or inner prayer, prayer of the heart. I feel a coincidence of my existential experiences in a positive sense, for example, timelessness, freedom of meaning, and immediately on the one hand, with an evolved traditional form and shape. And for me, that is still a good life in the monastery at the moment. But sometimes I would like to give up the specifically religious form and simply live in the wild as a monk. And I'm doing that pretty intensively here too. And then I just let myself drift through the day with lots of time and just walking around. Somis Marden, a prominent monk from our order, writes, God, it's not someone else. That's it, my Trappist friend. For a detailed answer to what you could gain by foregoing this immediate consumption of the cultural marshmallow, you will then have at least twice as much. From the monk's perspective, but also from the minimalist perspective, clinging to social values and comfort creates poverty. Poverty in personal development, poverty in life, in connection, poverty in joy of life, happiness in general, and discovering how beautiful it is to live. Now you could say, that's just an example of giving up from a monk who might be crazy to you and he doesn't have to work at all. And maybe he's just talking up his traditions. That's why I'm going to quote a completely normal person who is in professional life and has 2 jobs. I'll call her Kirsten now so that she can still remain anonymous. Kirsten now also lives as a minimalist, meaning she forgoes many of the values in our culture. Her apartment looks like she hasn't moved in yet. It's so empty. And what did she gain in return? From an inner perspective, this means concentrating on the essentials. So, Kirsten writes, "The world urgently needs this message. It's about following your true human nature. I've actually already started a draft of possibly writing a book called Humans in Captivity, because that's really what it is. We live a fake life in a fake world around our fake friends to impress. For me, minimalism is almost the answer to almost everything. Health problems, mental health problems, the destruction of the environment, and people's increasing debt. In the USA or UK, you often get the impression that it's just a trend. It is also very closely linked to zero waste, which I find incredibly interesting. I'm not at 1 jar of trash per year yet, but it's getting better. As a minimalist, I now see much more what is wrong with our society. But I also often feel as if I know something forbidden that you can't say because many people won't believe you. It's so incredibly liberating to let everything go. But yes, it is a process. I've been on it since 2013. It started out innocently enough, and now I'm becoming more and more radical." And Kirsten writes to me, "So it's often presented as a trend, but I went through very similar phases as you. And the sentence about releasing humans into the wild really hit home. A completely new world opens up, and I became endlessly adventurous and realized that my life doesn't take place in my bed or on my sofa. I was also looked at strangely once and again when people I knew were there. My friends are already familiar with minimalism, and thank God are understanding. But my friends asked me several times whether I had just moved in. I also experienced running barefoot like this. I don't go barefoot every day, but I go as often as I can, and I've forgotten about heels. The tip about the time window for eating. Here's a comment so that you don't just mumble away all day, but just say, I only eat within 5 hours of each other, which is what, a day? Here, so continue in the text. The tip about the time slot for eating really blew me away. I also started only eating within 5 hours. I've been living vegan since the beginning of my mini lifestyle anyway, but it really takes it to another level. I'm only on day 3, but it feels like a sheet of frosted glass is being removed from my eye. At the top 3, I'm super happy and have amazing energy. I have now simply brought you 2 quotes from many very warm letters, from emails that I have received since I started using the internet about how I live an increasingly minimalistic life. Maybe you realize that it's incredibly difficult to tell people who just see this invasion mallow in front of them that you really get too, and how it feels when you increasingly come out of your captivity to this culture seems like a renunciation. You don't win things right away, but there is something much more important than things and reputation and popularity. That is you. This is your essence that you gain, and your own essence that is beautiful. It's free, it's strong, it's wild, it is pure happiness, life force. And that is what the others experienced as captivity. Captivity makes you sick, sad, and dependent. You feel unfree and, above all, made small. Man, on the other hand, is a truly magnificent creature. And even if he really knew himself, he wouldn't be locked in space and time. The physical body is in space in the here and now. The heart of the soul body knows no spatial limitations. You can describe it with the soul of an Indian or perhaps African tribes in the past. You can make calls without a cell phone. And the spirit is not even locked in time. You are trans-temporal beings. Do you realize that this is going to be really difficult to convey to someone who only sees themselves as a physical body and feels small and dependent and powerless? I have made two statements, one from monasticism, a Japanese man who then followed this very classic path from a very strict old Christian monastic order and arrived in this total experience of liberation and unity, and then former ones of these young people who broke out because it's now a cultural trend, who tried something and got it. Of course, it would be a shame if it remained a trend, and that's why I try to combine both movements, so they certainly connected in me. That is also my concern, that minimalists experience much more of what is inside them, because they are on the right path. So that's the two big examples. For me, needs in Christianity are very mixed, because Christianity, which is loyal to the state, has often served to not show people at all that they get 2 marshmallows. They were only promised in heaven. So, earthly vale of tears and then maybe 2 marshmallows in heaven. The people then became loyal to the government, obedience to the church, commandments and the like. So people were then kept more like farm animals instead of being liberated. So for me that is abuse. And true Christianity actually has a very similar message to the other mystical movements of the world. It's about the liberation of people, that they recognize their true nature. That is, that they are not made small, as in standard Christianity, or as citizens, small, powerless, dependent, in the multifunctional society, dutifully serving the system, but rather, mystics were actually always something like punks, except that when they lived as monks, they wiped out a parallel society. And there, in silence or secrecy, they developed the truly great human abilities. With the minimalist movement, I think it would be great if it continued in exactly the same way, i.e. became even more radical. It's not just about getting rid of cultural waste so that you can feel better, so that you can live better, can clean faster, can do more exercise and have more fun, and can maintain and visit more friends and relationships. It's still about discovering who you really are. So as in the ancient oracle, gnoti, sauton, know thyself, or gnoscet, e ipsum if you want it in Latin. It's always the same message. What you are looking for on the outside is you. Ultimately, you are the producer of reality. You're like an insanely powerful wizard. So if I were to translate it funny, you are Harry Potter under the stairs with the muggles. And as long as you just set up your quarters under the stairs in a minimalist way, and, if so, feed yourself to stay happy under your stairs, you've already done a lot. But you have to make your way to platform 934 and go to Hogwarts tell you the rest. You are a magician, and a great one at that. Or to put it another way, you are truly magical. Now I come back to needs in the Christian Tower. So I'm talking about how the monks deal with needs. So it couldn't be more radical, more renounced from a cultural perspective. And as far as I understand it, when someone becomes a monk in an Orthodox monastery like that, they even bury their entire cultural identity. This profession, this initiation ritual as a monk for life, also has many components of the burial ritual. From the monk's perspective, this is a gigantic liberation. All these cultural burdens are now lifted from him. In his view, the monks are buried for the culture and given a new name, which is a gigantic liberation. He is now freed, like an adventurer, to begin the search for who he is in his essence as a human being. To shorten the matter here, The human being and I myself argue so that I can explain it to you better. Your core experience, your essence as a human being. In the spirit of Meister Eckhart, people become essential. Your nature as a human being is exactly that and much, much more than what people who have had a near-death experience. So here we have this die-off again. All these programs from the brain are now mud, and you realize that you are an immaterial being, that you are pure energy. It's like an explosion, actually a birth. Your energy system no longer carries this body around, which is, of course, a bit of a shame, but at the same time these cultural fuses are now blown. And now you see your true light on a lower level. So you yourself are a being of light, you are a pure energy being, and what you now feel when you unite with your essential light is that you are peace. You are something like love, but without having to sacrifice yourself for others or having to give up anything angry, potty, you just are. You are happiness, you are joy. You are connected to everything. You are gigantic. You are beautiful. You are perfect. This is your potential. You were actually born with that here on earth, and then the culture came. And now you understand what renunciation means from the monk's perspective. Being in the culture means renunciation. Of course, if you think logically through to the end, and that's my thing, that would work too. So you recognize who you really are while you're living, through meditation exercises, by concentrating on the essentials, and then try to bring that into the culture. There will be areas of friction, and in the end that is more or less how it is. Some will be really happy that you are helping them with their search, that you are shortening the long search time, while others will simply panic or call you crazy. Plato, he wrote a parable of heights. He's trying to make that clear. People sit in a cave, that is, this culture, and stare at silhouettes on the wall and take that to be all of reality, while the person who goes looking says, "Hey, where does the light that casts the shadows come from? That's an exit from the cave. I always crawl up and look at it. Shadows are far too boring for me. Hey, there is light. Yes, I am in the light." And then I discovered that in the cave there was just a fake reality. We can also say a bit more intellectual symbolic reality, society, symbolic interactionism, and so on. We agree on roles. Everything is a role play. Everything is a gigantic fantasy game. And you realize that what is money? It's a convention, it's a symbol, especially if it is no longer backed by gold. Your social roles are also simply symbols. Why are you playing this theater role? You could also be someone completely different. You've just been programmed to do it. In this respect, he is the cultured person who forgoes almost everything because he doesn't ask any more questions. Contents itself with basic social programming. Man deprograms himself. And this deprogramming process is renunciation. To add to this so that this doesn't get misunderstood, you obviously don't have to become a monk to do this. That's why I gave the two examples at the beginning. From the perspective of the radicals in Christianity, we could also say Buddhists, Zen Buddhists, or even honest normal people. So minimalists who would now do mental training, or maybe someone can meditate in their cluttered living room and find that out of it. Others use drugs to do this. Your energy system no longer carries this body around, which is of course a bit of a shame, but at the same time these cultural fuses are now blown. And now you see your true light on a lower level. So you yourself are a being of light. You are a pure energy being, and what you now feel when you unite with your essential light is that you are peace. You are something like love, but without having to sacrifice yourself for others or having to give up anything. Angry, potty, you just are. You are happiness, you are joy, you are connected to everything, you are gigantic, you are beautiful, you are perfect. This is your potential. You were actually born with that here on earth, and then the culture came. So there are X paths. You can have a near-death experience for that too. Almost all roads don't lead to Rome now, but even if you have a happy love event, or are doing sports, or being outside in nature, you can get caught up in it, and suddenly you realize that the reality is bigger. And that's the win. you realize who you really are. In the Bible, a kind of New Testament, Jesus also tells stories that always tries to summarize what you're actually looking for. It's small, like a mustard seed, but it's a seed and it becomes a gigantic plant. Or Jesus tells us that there was a merchant who collected precious pearls. And one day he discovered a gigantic, large, beautiful pearl. And when he saw it, he fell out of his shell and sold his entire pearl collection that he had in order to buy this one acquire. User Jesus tells us that someone discovered a treasure in his field. So you see, no matter whether you start in antiquity or now with Jesus, the mystics always have the same message. You are the lottery win, what you are looking for up to this point in terms of happiness, recognition, value, peace. The end of you inner conflict between all these conflicts and roles and expectations and this effort to be someone, you can put all that into your pocket once you have had this basic experience. And from my point of view, that can be the only meaning of giving up on religious paths. Everything else is a rip-off. Everything else only serves to exploit you, to turn you into a farm animal, and be careful. How do you differentiate between that now? The one that renounces, the other that demands. And society definitely demands a lot of discipline and a lot of sacrifice in order to give you one marshmallow and then the other sacrifice so that you really have this essential realization of how wonderful you are. The answer is, again, I'll take it from classical monasticism, totally simple. That was called discernment of the spirits. If you notice that something gives you energy, strength, such as what is in nature, then you are on the right path. But if you notice that something is dampening, depressing, draining your life energy, it could be at school, it could be in your relationship, it could be the job you currently have, then you will not reach your potential in this way find, because run away, then do something else. Jesus also left a classic sentence about this. I don't want to convert you here, but you will notice that the great teachers always say very similar sentences, because look for the one from your religious system. Jesus says, "What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and yet suffers damage to his soul, or and yet does not recognize his own nature?" The minimalist would say, "I do without a lot and what I have found and discovered myself." And then I would say, go further, you will discover even more. In this respect, minimalism combined with mental training is really important to me. Yes, and I could conclude with such an old nursery to be happy, it requires little, and whoever is happy is king. Lao Tzu, it is better not to do anything than to do nothing with a lot of effort and work. If you follow your true nature, you will experience your own wealth and your life will become increasingly effortless and flowing. This is what the Chinese call knowing without doing. You are then just you, but why would Master Eckhart say the rose is the rose again? It just blooms. It's such a deep, quiet calm. When you're suit inside yourself and your actions are no longer motivated by pleasing others. You then don't keep an artificial system running, but you are one with the flow of life.